Supreme Court is issuing a new ruling making it harder to charge Capitol riot defendants with obstruction. The justices ruled the charge of obstructing an official proceeding must include proof the defendants tried to tamper with or destroy documents. Only some of the people who attacked the Capitol January 6, 2021 fall into that category. Today's ruling could also affect the potential prosecution of Donald Trump. 2 of the 4 federal charges he's facing in Washington are connected to the court's obstruction statute. Trump called the decision, quote, big news.
And WGN political analyst Paul Lisnig is joining us now to talk about the Supreme Court, reaction from yesterday's debate, and more from the past week. Paul,
very
good
quiet
to see you.
week.
What a week it has been.
Well, let's start off with Ed Burke,
sure.
The longest-serving alderman, former alderman. He was finally sentenced for his bribery and extortion case. What, $2 million, almost 2 years?
He'll have to do 85% of that.
Was this what they expected, what prosecutors expected?
No, Michael, prosecutors asked for 10 years. Now, they knew they wouldn't get 10 years. That's why they asked for 10. But that it turned out to be 2, I think that was even lower than most analysts would have expected that he got. But, you know, what does the judge do? He weighs mitigating and aggravating circumstances. So when you look at Burke's career overall, he was a cop. He did have years of service. He did some bad stuff, and a lot of people were very angry that he didn't get more time. But he also, at least to some degree, accepted responsibility for what happened. That goes into the decision the judge made.
And where could he spend that time?
Well, he could go to Terre Haute, Indiana. It would be the closest place, probably. That's about 4.5 hours away for people to go visit him. And I have to tell you, I've been in that facility. You know, people call them Club Fed.
You visited that facility?
I have been, yes.
Okay.
No, I wasn't, yes, I wasn't. Just visiting.
Just visiting.
But there's no such thing as Club Fed. I mean, it's where George Ryan was,
Right.
former governor. And, you know, I mean, it is not a life anybody wants. So when people describe Club Fed, there's no such thing.
It's just a fun thing to say, right?
It was, well, that's what they call it.
We-
Well, because it's not a maximum security kind of situation.
Right, it's a different thing. We talked a lot about the presidential debate. We had you here analyzing it for us. Today, Democrats publicly and privately, mostly privately, talked about how could we replace Joe Biden on the ticket, but you recognize that that's a very difficult thing to propose. Biden has said he's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, you know, I was as honest and fair as I could be last night as we talked about it, but I knew as we were talking this was going to be a very tough day today for Joe Biden. Now, he went to North Carolina and he did a great job on his feet giving a speech. So when he's working off a teleprompter with a speech, he still has that momentum. But yes, lots of calls today, New York Times and other entities calling for him to step down. Here's the thing. The way this would happen, if this were to happen, is that the DNC would have to meet, okay? It's not just, and it's not a smoke-filled back room. The DNC would have to meet. They are meeting in August anyway, on August 7th, I think it is, because they had to actually nominate him because of the Ohio law that says he has to be on the ballot by then or he can't be on or he can't run. So they're going to meet anyway. It could be by Zoom, even prior to that. But these delegates are all promised to Joe Biden. They're loyal to Joe Biden. So they're not going to show up and say, okay, who do you want to vote for? Joe Biden, bottom line is, would have to agree to step out and agree to release them. That is how things would proceed towards another candidate. And who might they go for if that were to happen? You know, most people would say, well, doesn't it automatically go to Kamala Harris? She's the vice president. The answer is no. If he were to step out, it can go anywhere, and that's what the negotiation among the leaders of the party would be. So you'll see names in there. Look, people talk about J.B. Pritzker from here at home, but Raphael Warnock, Gavin Newsom. Lots of names are thrown in. My guess is they would
Wes
probably
Moore's
have to,
another one.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And my guess is that they have to go probably for a person of color, maybe probably a female as well. It would go in that direction, but right
not
now,
not necessarily Kamala Harris.
no, not necessarily.
Yeah.
It would be a logical pick, but she
Right.
also has issues with her popularity
Yeah.
in terms of polls. So that would be
So it
that would be
doesn't have to
problematic. But listen, today Joe Biden said, "I'm not going anywhere." We'll see what happens if the day comes that it would be a decision he makes by sitting down with Jill and Ron Klein and different people in his life who would have to have that serious talk with him.
Lots of Supreme Court stuff coming down today. Let's see if we can get through it. Corruption case decision. What is it and how could it affect Mike Madigan?
So this is a case that came out of Indiana, right? There was a lawmaker there named Snyder, and what he did was he gave contracts to Peterbilt, a construction thing, and they gave him over $1 million in contracts, and then he needed money. He was having trouble, so he went to them and said, I need money. I need $13,000. Or I think he asked for $15,000 and they negotiated him and gave him $13,000. But they called it a gratuity, kind of a thank you for what you did to get us the contract. And these, by the way, these are consulting fees. Anyway, Doesn't sound legal, does it? And it works its way up all the way to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court said, oh, no, that's fine. Kavanaugh, who wrote the decision, said, look, what if a lawmaker gives a speech at a college and they give him a sweatshirt? You don't want issues with that. That's not $13,000 in what clearly it may not be a bribe. It's a gratuity. So how does that affect Madigan? Madigan's whole argument is that anything that he got in return was all a gratuity. And by the way, the reason this is important, that statute is what helps prosecutors go from a sentence of 2 years to 10 years. That's what it's all about. But now I think the prosecutors here will probably have to think about it and probably drop their 5 counts of the 23 against Madigan. If they're smart, they'll just get rid of those 5, proceed against the other ones.
And let's talk about the Chevron ruling.
Right.
That is a situation in which government agencies are able to regulate a whole array of things that affect Americans' health. That got struck a blow.
So for the sake of time, I'm going to go to a specific example there. This wasn't about the case today, but remember the mifepristone case?
Yeah.
And the court said, you don't have standing, so mifepristone stays for now.
Abortion pill.
But the issue was, when the right people bring it to us, the abortion pill case, then we might do something different. Well, what they did today by overturning Chevron was to say, you know what? Chevron says we're supposed to defer to federal agencies like the FDA because they're scientists, they're doctors, they know better. Supreme Court said, no. That's our job. We will interpret statutes. We will interpret ambiguity, not the agencies. It's a huge shift to basically, quote unquote, put agencies out of business, which means a future administration can really just wipe out a lot of these agencies. And something like mifepristone, which will make its way back to the court within a period of years, now what will happen is the court says, we will decide whether that's safe.
And the court is supposed to decide on Donald Trump's immunity.
Yeah, that'll be Monday.
Yeah.
We know that Monday's the last day. It's got to come down then. We don't know what they're going to do. My best guess, mark your scorecards.
Yeah.
I think what they're going to say is, no, there's no such thing as complete immunity for a president. But they're going to say there may be things that a president does which fall within the scope of their job. And so they're going to end up, I believe, sending this back to Judge Chutkan in D.C. and saying, Judge, here's a list of all the things that Donald Trump is accused of doing. You need to have a hearing and decide whether any of those or all of those are within the scope. That takes time. Those will be appealed. This trial ain't happening before the election.
Sunday morning show.
Sunday morning show. I'm going to have Secretary of State Alexi Giannoulias is going to join us. So we're going to talk about all the cool things going on in his office. I actually renewed my license online. Didn't know I could do that. Yeah, I did. It's
Yes,
very, very
don't you
easy.
watch the news?
Yeah. Oh, I did, but I didn't know I could do it. Professor Rob Shapiro will talk about the key SCOTUS cases, Supreme Court we've just been talking about. And Professor Anthony Fowler from U of C is going to talk about his research with moderate voters and how in which the debate and other things may impact them going forward because they may determine this election.
Timely. All right.
A lot of fun. Thank
Thank
you, guys.
Paul.